Hey guys, tonight we're traveling far back, long before castles, plagues, or kings, to a world lit only by firelight and moon. A time when survival meant listening to the darkness and watching for glowing eyes beyond the thorn barriers. This is Did Early Humans Save Each Other from Predators and More? A quiet journey into the lives of our distant ancestors. Forget the romantic hunts and heroic cave paintings. The truth is slower, colder, and far more fragile. Most of us wouldn't have lasted a single night out there. So before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these sleepy dives into history. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I love seeing this little sleepy community gather from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's story together. Among teeth and claws, how early humans faced predators together. Imagine the world not as we know it now, with lit streets and steel doors, but as a stretch of endless plains, forests, and caves where the night was absolute and unbroken. The hum of insects and the soft chirping of distant nocturnal birds gave way to the slow growl of something unseen. You are sitting by a flickering fire, one of humanity's earliest triumphs, surrounded by your small group, knowing that out there, in the darkness, were eyes watching you back. The precarious existence of early humans. Around 2 million years ago, our ancestors, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and eventually Homo sapiens, lived not at the top of the food chain, but somewhere uncomfortably in the middle. Lions, saber-toothed cats, Smilodon, giant hyenas, and other carnivores occupied the top rungs of the ecological ladder. Early humans, lacking speed, claws, or great strength, relied on intelligence, cooperation, and environmental manipulation to survive. Archaeological evidence from sites like Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania reveals clusters of bones with cut marks lying alongside gnawed marks from predators. This overlap suggests that early humans often scavenged carcasses after big cats had eaten, or, more precariously, that predators returned to feed after humans had taken their share. Life wasn't a neat process of hunting and gathering. It was a constant negotiation with other species over who got to eat and who got eaten. Fire, a fragile boundary. The control of fire around 1 to 1.5 million years ago represented a turning point. Fire allowed early humans to cook food, extend waking hours, and fend off predators. But this control wasn't immediate or absolute. Charred bones and hearth sites show that groups may have only been able to keep small fires alive intermittently. Rain, wind, or lack of fuel could plunge a group back into darkness quickly. You can picture a group huddled near their fire, arranging logs carefully, one or two individuals assigned the dull but crucial job of keeping embers alive overnight. In the distance, the roar of a lion echoes across the savannah. The flickering flames throw shadows that keep hyenas guessing. Predators hesitate to cross the light, but only just. Even today, in modern camps and African reserves, lions occasionally skirt close to firelight, testing the courage of the strange, upright apes within. Cooperation as survival strategy. Unlike solitary animals, early humans increasingly relied on group cooperation. Individuals standing guard, mothers nursing by the fire, hunters returning with scavenged remains, elders telling stories or passing down techniques for tool making. All were part of a tightly knit survival strategy. This social cooperation may have extended to mutual defense. Some paleoanthropologists theorize that groups worked together to chase away predators from kills or to rescue individuals. This isn't mere romantic speculation. Modern chimpanzees have been observed banding together to fend off leopards or strange intruders, and early humans likely behaved similarly, though with fire and stone tools to tip the odds. A fractured femur discovered at the site of Shanidar Cave in Iraq, belonging to a Neanderthal male, shows signs of healing. Such an injury would have made independent survival impossible for months. Yet he lived. Someone must have fed him, protected him, and kept him warm. It's a quiet but profound testament to the communal bonds that early humans formed in a dangerous world. Predators and scavengers, a shared landscape. The ecosystem wasn't divided neatly into their land and our land. Predators and humans shared hunting grounds, water sources, and sleeping spaces. Some caves show alternating layers, first occupied by big cats, then by humans, then by hyenas again. It's as though groups of different species took turns in a tense, unspoken rotation. One striking example comes from Swartkrans Cave in South Africa. Fossils of Paranthropus robustus and early Homo individuals show puncture marks from leopard canines. Leopards had likely dragged individuals into the cave to feed. Later, humans occupied the same cave, building fires on the very floors where their predecessors had died. The predator's lair became a refuge, and perhaps later, a fortress. The long, uneventful nights. For most of human history, the nights were long. Much of survival consisted of simply waiting, guarding the campfire, listening, adjusting to the rhythm of the nocturnal world. You might imagine someone on watch, tracing patterns in the stars overhead, poking the embers to keep them glowing, occasionally catching the glint of eyes just beyond the firelight. Nothing happens in these moments, and yet they shaped humanity profoundly. They forced groups to create routines, night watches, sleeping in shifts, making circular camps with fires at the center. These routines laid the groundwork for early human culture, rhythm, and shared responsibility. The sounds in the dark. Many predators hunted primarily through stealth and sudden attack, but their presence could be heard. Distant hyena laughter, the heavy cough of a lion, the guttural growls of saber-toothed cats. Early humans became attuned to these sounds. Even now, humans have a heightened sensitivity to certain animal vocalizations at night, a remnant of ancient vigilance. Imagine lying on your side on packed earth, a piece of hide draped over you. The fire pops softly. Someone nearby shifts and coughs. And then, from far off, comes the unmistakable sound of a predator's growl. Every muscle in your body tightens, not in panic, but in practiced alertness. This wasn't an anomaly, it was nightly reality. The question of altruism. One of the most intriguing aspects of early human survival is the possibility that groups rescued one another. If a member wandered too far and was attacked by a predator, did others intervene? Some evidence suggests they might have. Cut marks on animal bones found alongside human bones suggest that early humans occasionally reclaimed bodies from predators, not always for burial, but sometimes for resource use. But it also hints at social bonds, attempts to retrieve the fallen. Some researchers propose that such rescues and retrievals fostered tighter social cohesion, as those who survived attacks became living reminders of shared risk and mutual aid. The lives of early humans were not filled with constant drama, but with long stretches of quiet, uneasy coexistence with other creatures. Their nights were marked by glowing embers, wary glances into the darkness, and a shared understanding that survival depended on one another. But the story of how early humans faced predators together is far from complete. Because while fire and cooperation offered protection, danger still struck, sometimes suddenly, sometimes devastatingly. How did these small bands respond when predators finally breached their fragile defenses? The night fire has burned low. Ash drifts softly upward, glowing briefly before vanishing into the black sky. In the distance, the rhythmic cough of a lion rolls across the plains, answered faintly by hyenas. Within the small human band, bodies are curled beneath hides and grasses. A single watcher pokes the embers with a stick, glancing frequently toward the tree line where shadows blend into deeper shadows. This is the fragile moment between safety and catastrophe that define the survival strategies of early humans. In this section, we will explore what happened when predators breached the perimeter, how humans adapted their shelters and behaviors, and the slow development of organized defense. When predators struck, archaeological sites provide silent evidence of sudden, violent encounters between early humans and the animals they lived beside. At the site of Drimmelen in South Africa, for example, hominin fossils show clear leopard puncture marks on skulls. These weren't scavenged remains. They were the victims themselves, dragged into trees or caves just as leopards do with prey today. For many early groups, particularly before the widespread mastery of fire, a nighttime predator attack meant chaos. There was no single alarm system, no walls, no weapons beyond sticks and stones, and no organized guard rotations. Instead, survival often depended on instinctive group reactions. The cries of one member might wake the rest, prompting panic clustering, grabbing of children, and desperate attempts to wave torches or throw stones. Evidence suggests that some groups began to exploit natural defensive landscapes. High cliffs, narrow rock shelters, and enclosed clearings acted as primitive fortresses. Predator attack marks on bones tend to cluster in more open settlement sites, whereas bones from cave and rock shelter contexts show fewer signs of predation. Gradually, humans may have learned to select their campsites not only for proximity to water and resources, but also for defensibility. The first, walls, circular camps, and thorn barriers. Before bricks, there were branches. Ethnographic parallels from recent hunter-gatherer societies such as the San and Hadza peoples show how groups construct simple thorny barriers around sleeping areas to deter animals. These barriers don't physically stop a determined predator, but they create noise and delay, buying the group precious seconds to react. Some paleoanthropologists suggest that early humans may have arranged branches, thorn bushes, or even piles of bones in circles around their fires. This practice is difficult to detect archaeologically, since plant materials decay quickly, but the logic is sound. A low, thorny hedge can prevent silent stalking, force predators into a noisy approach, and funnel them toward defensible points. Circular arrangements of stones and post holes have been found at some late Pleistocene sites, hinting at early construction of defined camp boundaries. Though still rudimentary, these were the distant ancestors of the defensive walls and stockades that humans would build millennia later. Weapons in the night. The simplest tools, sticks, clubs, and sharp stones, were humanity's first line of defense. Over time, groups learned to deliberately shape these implements. Acheulean hand axes, emerging around 1.7 million years ago, weren't just for butchering meat. They could also serve as formidable slashing or stabbing tools if a predator charged. Imagine a nighttime breach. A hyena or leopard slips through the thorn barrier, emboldened by hunger or curiosity. One member spots movement at the edge of the firelight. A shout. Bodies jerk awake. Someone grabs a burning branch, swinging it wildly. Others pick up stones, their edges sharp from hours of flint knapping. The predator hesitates. It knows fire, but hunger pushes it forward. A thrown stone connects with a solid thud. Another flaming brand is hurled. The animal flees, leaving behind only deep paw prints in the ash. Over hundreds of generations, these moments shaped tool use. Not all weapons were for hunting, many were for defense. This may explain why some sites yield disproportionately large numbers of stones concentrated around hearths, potentially a stockpile ready to be grabbed in emergencies. Collective defense, roles emerge. One of the most profound developments in early human behavior was the assignment of roles, even if informally. Certain individuals may have naturally stayed more alert at night, perhaps older members who slept lightly, or those less involved in daytime hunting. Others were likely tasked with maintaining the fire, a dull but critical job. This division of labor, watchers, sleepers, tool keepers, fire maintainers, represents the earliest form of organized defense. Not every group member reacted the same way during a threat. Some grabbed children, others grabbed weapons. Even without formal language, coordinated shouts, gestures, and repeated nightly routines would have created a shared defensive choreography. In some ethnographic observations of hunter-gatherers, nighttime attackers such as hyenas often retreat not because of individual heroics, but because of collective noise and movement. Everyone shouts, throws things, waves fire, and creates confusion. Early humans likely relied on similar tactics. It wasn't sophisticated, but it was effective often enough to make the difference between survival and extinction. The evolution of shelters. Shelter building was another subtle but transformative development in defense. Early rock shelters and caves offered natural protection, but they were finite resources, often already occupied by predators. In some cases, humans displaced carnivores and then maintained fires at cave mouths to keep them from returning. Charred remains near cave entrances suggest deliberate placement of hearths as both light sources and deterrents. Later, temporary shelters made of branches, hides, and bones became more common, especially in open landscapes. These shelters weren't sturdy, but when arranged in clusters, they created psychological and physical boundaries. A circle of low huts with a communal fire at the center forms a controlled zone. Predators approaching this zone encounter more humans together, more movement, and more firelight. It's not hard to imagine the first faint sense of inside and outside forming here, not in terms of walls and property, but in the feeling of collective space versus wild darkness. This psychological boundary may have been as important as the physical one. It allowed humans to relax, to sleep more soundly, to allocate roles more efficiently. In short, it allowed culture to grow in the cracks between fear. The lessons of loss. Not every night ended with successful defense. Some ended in tragedy, an individual taken, a child lost, a fire accidentally allowed to die. Over generations, these events left imprints in group memory. Stories, gestures, and warnings would be passed down. Don't sleep too far from the fire. Watch the wind direction. keep the children between the huts. Although we cannot recover the language of these warnings, their effects are visible archaeologically. The placement of hearths, group sleeping arrangements, and even the orientation of shelters seem increasingly deliberate over time. People positioned themselves so that everyone could see the fire and each other, a communal line of sight. This simple practice reduced surprise attacks and fostered trust. These losses may also have intensified the bonds within groups. The death of a member in a predator attack wasn't just a biological event, it was a shared emotional rupture. Care for the injured, mourning, and perhaps ritual treatment of remains slowly emerged as group responses. The danger of predators helped forge community. Predator patterns, learning the enemy. Surviving required more than reaction. It required understanding predator behavior. Lions and hyenas hunt differently. Leopards are silent stalkers. Hyenas are noisy scavengers and opportunistic attackers. Over time, early humans learned these patterns. For example, leopards prefer ambush, often targeting individuals who stray from the group. Lions may circle camps, probing for weakness, but often retreat from sustained fire and noise. Hyenas are patient. They wait for the fire to burn low, then dart in to snatch food or vulnerable individuals. Recognizing these behaviors allowed groups to adapt. Some may have stored food above ground or in thorn enclosures to keep hyenas away. Others positioned fire strategically to create overlapping light zones. By anticipating attacks rather than merely responding to them, humans gained a subtle but significant edge. The birth of night watches. At some point, no one can say exactly when, night watches became intentional. Instead of random light sleepers, groups likely assigned specific individuals to keep watch in turns. This required planning, trust, and memory, knowing whose turn it was, waking the next person, ensuring the fire stayed alive. The night watch is one of the quiet, often overlooked innovations in human prehistory. It doesn't leave behind fossils or tools, but its effects were immense. A functional watch system would have reduced surprise attacks, increased average sleep safety, strengthened group cohesion and accountability, freed others to sleep more deeply, conserving energy for daytime tasks. This innovation marked a psychological turning point. It suggests that humans weren't just reacting to nature. They were beginning to structure their lives deliberately against it. And all of it happened long before cities or armies existed. Predators as unintended teachers. Ironically, the very predators that threatened early humans may have helped shape their intelligence and culture. Constant pressure forced groups to innovate, cooperate, and communicate better. Watching animal behavior sharpened observational skills. Coordinating defense improved social bonds. Assigning roles encouraged memory and planning. In this sense, predators acted as silent tutors, their claws and teeth pressing humanity toward ingenuity. The process was slow, uneven, and often tragic, but relentless. Over millennia, humans became not just survivors, but strategists. The long nights grew slightly less perilous as shelters improved, watch systems developed, and collective defense became habitual. But even with these strategies, the wild remained dangerous. A moment of inattention, a fire allowed to burn out, a watchman who drifted into sleep, could still mean disaster. How did early humans respond when predators actually broke through these defenses? What happened in the chaotic heart of a nighttime attack? The fire is burning low again, but this time something is different. The distant hyena calls have stopped. The night feels unnaturally still. Someone on watch notices movement beyond the thorn barrier, a flicker of reflected eyes in the darkness. A shape, low and deliberate, glides just beyond the reach of the firelight. The watcher's hand tightens around a burning stick. Within moments, what had been a quiet night on the savannah turns into a frantic struggle for survival. In this section, we will delve into what actually happened when predators breached early human defenses, the tactics, the chaos, the wounds, and the cultural responses that followed. These were the crucibles in which cooperation, quick thinking, and resilience were tested in the most immediate and terrifying ways. The breach. Predator attacks didn't always come in the same way. Sometimes, a single leopard crept silently through the dark, testing for weakness. Other times, a pack of hyenas surrounded a camp, approaching from multiple directions to confuse the humans inside. Lions, less subtle but far more powerful, occasionally charged directly into a ring of fire and shouting if hunger pushed them far enough. When such a breach occurred, everything depended on speed of response. Night watch alerts were likely loud and abrupt, shouted warnings, rapid movements, or even specific vocalizations used only in emergencies. Anthropologists studying some modern hunter-gatherer groups note that short, sharp, high-pitched calls are often used to alert the group at night. Early humans may have used similar signals long before structured language evolved fully. Once alerted, the camp transformed instantly. Sleepers jolted awake. Children were pulled toward the center. Those nearest the fire grabbed burning branches or pre-selected stones. A few bold individuals stepped forward, making themselves look larger, waving fire, shouting, a tactic still effective today against many big predators. Chaos at the edge of the firelight. Archaeological evidence can't record panic, but it can record its consequences. At Swartkrans Cave in South Africa, hominin fossils show both predator bite marks and stone tool impact marks on the same bones. This unusual combination suggests that predators and humans sometimes fought over bodies in real time, not just scavenging after the fact. Imagine a hyena darting through a narrow gap in a thorn barrier, lunging for food scraps or a small child. The nearest adults shout and swing flaming sticks. A stone arcs through the air, striking the animal's flank. Another person lunges with a sharp-edged hand axe. The predator snaps back, teeth clashing in the dark, before retreating into the night. In the confusion, a human may be scratched or bitten. The entire event lasts seconds, but its memory lingers for years. In some cases, predators succeeded. Remains from leopard lairs show occasional adult hominin skulls, indicating that even vigilant groups lost members. The scars on fossilized bones tell silent stories of chaos, fractured limbs, bite marks on skulls, dismemberment. For the individuals who survived, these attacks were formative experiences. Wounds and survival. Being wounded in a predator attack in prehistory was not necessarily a death sentence. Remarkably, fossil evidence shows healed injuries that would have required long-term care. For example, one early Neanderthal fossil displays a healed compound fracture in the arm, an injury that would have immobilized the individual for months. Someone must have provided food and protection during that time. After attacks, groups likely gathered around the injured. There were no formal medical systems, but instinctive actions, cleaning wounds with water, applying mud or plant material to stanch bleeding, holding limbs in position, may have helped. Ethnographic studies of small-scale societies show that even in the absence of modern medicine, community care can be surprisingly effective. Wounds also became visible markers of experience. A scarred elder might command respect, both for surviving and for embodying the group's shared history with predators. These individuals could serve as living reminders of tactics that worked and mistakes that could not be repeated, retaliation and scavenging. One of the most fascinating and less discussed aspects of predator breaches is the possibility of retaliation. In some cases, after a predator attack, groups may have pursued the animal the next day, either to recover a body or to kill the predator. This is supported by occasional finds of predator bones alongside human remains at certain sites, sometimes with cut marks indicating butchery. It's possible that retaliation served multiple purposes: reclaiming lost resources or bodies, both practical and emotional; deterring future attacks by demonstrating that humans were not passive prey; gaining meat, fur, or bone material from the predator itself. This behavior represents a shift from purely defensive reactions to proactive engagement. It's a subtle but significant psychological step, seeing predators not just as inevitable dangers, but as adversaries that could be outmaneuvered or even defeated. The role of fire in repelling attacks. In almost every defensive scenario, fire played a central role, but its effectiveness varied by species and situation. Lions, for example, often hesitate at the edge of firelight, wary of the heat and flickering unpredictability. Hyenas are more daring. They may circle repeatedly, darting in when the fire burns low. Leopards, ambush specialists, are less deterred by light but prefer surprise to confrontation. Early humans quickly learned that a strong, bright fire was worth more than any weapon. Night watchers became fire keepers, constantly feeding wood, adjusting logs to maximize brightness, and maintaining a perimeter of burning branches. A dying fire could mean death itself. Some groups may have used portable torches during attacks. Evidence from later periods suggests this was common. A flaming branch wielded by several individuals can confuse and disorient predators, making them retreat. Even today, in parts of Africa and India, villagers facing lion or leopard threats at night use coordinated torch-waving tactics to defend livestock. Group dynamics under threat. Moments of attack reveal much about social organization. In these situations, individuals had to make rapid decisions. Who grabs the weapons? Who gathers the children? Who maintains the fire? Over generations, these roles likely became habitual, a kind of unspoken protocol rehearsed nightly. It's not difficult to imagine that certain individuals gained reputations for bravery or vigilance. A particularly alert watchman who spotted danger early might be entrusted with more responsibility. Someone adept at throwing stones or wielding a club might be positioned strategically near the barrier. In this way, predator attacks acted as social catalysts, shaping hierarchies, trust, and leadership roles long before formal structures existed. Songs, stories, and memory of the attack. After surviving an attack, groups likely recounted the event repeatedly. This served both practical and cultural functions. Retelling allowed groups to analyze what went wrong, reinforce vigilance, and ensure that the younger members learned the lessons. But it also helped emotionally process the event. Without writing, memory was maintained through oral traditions, gestures, and nighttime storytelling. Around the fire on future nights, elders may have pointed toward the dark horizon, mimicking the moment of the breach, the throw of the stone, the roar of the lion. Children, wide-eyed, would absorb these stories as both cautionary tales and identity-building narratives. This is what happened when we let the fire die. This is where your uncle fought the leopard. These stories were not entertainment. They were repositories of survival knowledge, fear, and adaptation. Living under constant threat from predators shaped emotional responses in profound ways. Human brains evolved a strong sensitivity to sudden noises in the dark, glowing eyes, growls, and the silence that precedes an ambush. Many of the fears that linger today, fear of darkness, of watching eyes in the night, of growling animals, are likely rooted in these ancient experiences. But fear was not just paralyzing, it was adaptive. Groups that feared correctly, that built bigger fires, that assigned night watches, that clustered more tightly, had better chances of survival. Fear drove innovation. Predators as shapers of community identity. For some groups, recurring predator encounters may have become part of their identity. Just as later tribes or villages took pride in their warriors or hunters, early bands may have remembered and celebrated their successful defenses. Surviving an attack together forged bonds stronger than mere proximity. The shared adrenaline, the communal shouting, the relief afterward. All of these experiences created collective memory. The cave or grove where the lion came would be pointed out to newcomers. Generations later, that same place might hold spiritual significance. Predators thus shaped not only survival tactics, but the geography of memory, from prey to competitor. Over time, these nightly confrontations changed the balance between humans and predators. Humans became more organized, more watchful, more capable of fighting back. Predators, in turn, likely adjusted their behavior, avoiding camps with large fires or selecting solitary individuals on the fringes. This dynamic arms race slowly tilted the scale. Humans were not apex predators yet, but they were no longer simply prey. They were becoming competitors. The savanna and forest edges became contested spaces, shaped by strategies on both sides. The echo of a single night. Consider one hypothetical night, tens of thousands of years ago. A lioness tests the edge of a fire circle. She charges, scattering thorn branches. A man throws a stone, another swings a flaming branch. The lioness grabs a young male, dragging him a few meters before others rush in, shouting and throwing embers. She releases him and retreats. He survives, scarred. The next day, the group follows the tracks, finding the lion's resting place and scaring her off permanently. This single event becomes a story retold for decades. The young man grows old, his scars visible. Children learn not to let the fire burn too low. The thorn barrier is rebuilt stronger. Roles are assigned more clearly. And slowly, night after night, generation after generation, these moments accumulate into cultural memory. Predator breaches were terrifying but formative. They forced early humans to react, adapt, remember, and plan. They revealed strengths and weaknesses, bonded groups together, and etched fear deep into human consciousness. But how did these nightly struggles lead to broader changes in how humans organize their settlements and societies? At some point, temporary fire circles and thorn barriers evolved into permanent structures, strategic site choices, and ultimately, the slow ascent to apex status. How did these defensive experiences shape the earliest forms of community structure and settlement planning? The night has passed. The sky is turning pale blue, and the horizon is lined with the faint silhouettes of trees and rocky outcrops. Smoke from the dying fire drifts upward in thin ribbons, and the camp is beginning to stir. Children crawl out from under hides, adults stretch stiff limbs, and watchful eyes scan the surrounding terrain for signs of movement. The memory of the night's dangers lingers, but daylight brings a cautious sense of relief. This daily cycle of vigilance, reaction, and renewal profoundly shaped early human life. In this final section, we explore how the accumulated experience of countless nights, of breaches, losses, rescues, and firelit defenses, eventually laid the foundations for permanent settlements, social structures, and the rise of human dominance in predator-rich landscapes. From temporary camps to strategic settlements, early human groups were nomadic, moving regularly to follow food sources, water, or seasonal changes. But as their ability to defend themselves improved, they began to favor certain sites repeatedly. Caves with narrow entrances, sheltered rock overhangs, hilltops with wide views, or groves protected by natural barriers became preferred campsites. Archaeological evidence reveals that some sites were occupied intermittently over thousands of years, often by different human species. For example, Oldaway Gorge in Tanzania shows multiple layers of occupation, fire use, and tool-making over long spans of time. Shanidar Cave in Iraq was used repeatedly by Neanderthals for shelter and burials. Swartkrans and other South African cave sites show alternating use by predators and humans, eventually tipping toward human dominance. These were not yet villages or towns, but they represented an important behavioral shift, choosing locations for defense as well as for resource availability. Over time, the criteria for selecting a camp expanded beyond proximity to food and water. It included visibility, defensibility, and control over approaches. This marked the birth of strategic settlement planning, creating the concept of home. As camps became more consistently reused, the idea of a central place of safety emerged. This wasn't home in the modern sense, but a familiar place where the group felt more secure, where fire had burned many nights before, and where predator patterns were known. The thorn barriers might be rebuilt in the same places each time. Fire pits became recognizable depressions in the ground. Familiar rocks, trees, or cave walls became landmarks of memory. This slow accumulation of familiarity gave rise to a psychological distinction between inside, the defended camp, and outside, the unpredictable wild. Inside was where you slept, ate, nursed children, napped stone, and told stories. Outside was where you hunted and gathered, but also where danger lurked. This inside-outside dichotomy is a fundamental building block of human culture, reflected even in modern architecture, urban planning, and spiritual thought. Predators as architects. It may sound strange, but predators indirectly influence the layout of early human camps. Observations of modern traditional groups suggest that sleeping arrangements were often circular, with a fire in the center, shelters forming a ring, and a clear perimeter for watch and defense. This arrangement has clear benefits. Everyone can see the fire in each other. Watchers can observe all approaches. Children and vulnerable individuals can be placed in the innermost zones. Predators are forced to confront multiple defenders simultaneously if they attack. Archaeological hints of circular layouts, fire centrality, and peripheral activity zones appear in Paleolithic sites across Africa, Europe, and Asia. These patterns are not random. They are the physical imprint of a defensive mindset honed by countless predator encounters. Even the placement of tools and waste reflects this mindset. Sharp stones often cluster near central hearths, likely for quick access during emergencies. Food refuse is sometimes found just beyond sleeping zones, where predators could be lured and observed. Camp structure became a blend of domestic life and tactical defense. The rise of social roles and hierarchies. Constant predator pressure also helped crystallize social roles. Over time, repeated nightly defense likely led to more formalized watch systems, clearer role distinctions, and emergent leadership. A few key patterns likely developed. Watch coordinators. Individuals responsible for ensuring that night watches rotated properly and fires were maintained. Defenders. The strongest or most experienced members who stood at the perimeter during dangerous hours. Caretakers. Those who tended to children, injured individuals, or maintained food supplies. Strategists. Elder members who remembered past attacks and advised on camp placement and defensive improvements. None of these roles required written rules. Repetition alone was enough to turn emergency responses into habitual social structures. Those who excelled in defensive tasks may have gained greater authority or prestige. These patterns of responsibility and hierarchy represent the embryonic forms of community leadership that would later shape clans, tribes, and eventually states. Knowledge transmission and cultural memory. Another transformative consequence of predator encounters was the systematic transmission of survival knowledge. Nighttime storytelling was not just entertainment. It was instruction, memory preservation, and social cohesion. Elders would recount attacks from previous years, mimicking animal behaviors, demonstrating fire maintenance, or pointing out weaknesses in camp defenses. This knowledge wasn't abstract. It was visceral, tied to lived experience and real scars. Over generations, these stories accumulated into what anthropologists call cultural memory, the shared, collective knowledge that shapes group behavior even without direct experience. A child might never have seen a lion breach a camp, but they would know exactly what to do because they had heard the stories dozens of times. This oral preservation of tactics was a technological innovation in its own right. Long before walls or weapons advanced significantly, memory and storytelling served as tools of survival. Turning the tables. As humans became more organized, the balance of power between predators and humans began to shift. Predators remained dangerous, but humans increasingly. Selected camps that maximized defensive advantages, maintained larger and more consistent fires, making nighttime attacks riskier. Worked in larger groups, intimidating predators through numbers. Used tools deliberately for defense, not just opportunistically. Eventually, humans began to hunt predators, not only in retaliation, but proactively. This marked a pivotal change, from defending against predators to actively controlling and sometimes eliminating them from key territories. Evidence of this appears in sites where large carnivore remains show signs of butchery, or where predator populations decline in areas of intensive human activity. By the late Pleistocene, humans were no longer simply surviving despite predators. They were shaping ecosystems to reduce predator threats, expanding their territorial range, and occupying previously perilous landscapes with confidence. The long arc toward apex status. The defensive practices forged in the darkness of prehistoric nights eventually laid the foundation for humanity's ascent to apex predator status. Step by step, thorn barriers became permanent enclosures. Night watches evolved into organized community defense. Reused camps turned into long-term settlements. Defensive site selection led to proto-architecture and strategic urban planning. Predator control through hunting and fire led to territorial dominance. By the time early agricultural societies emerged, humans were architects of their environments, not just tenants within them. The fire circles of their ancestors had expanded into villages surrounded by walls, watchtowers, and cultivated fields, spaces where predators had little power left. And yet, the psychological residue of those nights remains in us. Fear of the dark, fascination with glowing eyes, the instinct to build shelters with central gathering places. These are echoes of a time when survival depended on shared vigilance and flickering firelight. Reflections, the quiet architects of civilization. It's tempting to think of civilization as the result of agriculture, writing, or monumental architecture. But long before crops were sown or cities rose, humans were building invisible structures. The habit of keeping fire alive, the practice of taking turns watching the night, the memory of losses and the stories that carried them, the instinct to cluster, to guard, to plan. Predators, lions, leopards, hyenas, saber-toothed cats, were unwilling tutors. Through their presence, they forced humanity to think collectively, to shape space strategically, and to remember across generations. Without them, human social structures might have evolved more slowly or along entirely different lines. The modern city, with its lit streets and locked doors, is the distant descendant of those firelit camps. Our sense of safety indoors, our urban layouts, our division of labor, all can trace a faint line back to those nights when our ancestors huddled together, surrounded by darkness, listening for the growl beyond the firelight. The next time you walk through a quiet city at night, notice the lights, the walls, the watchfulness of cameras and windows. These are not new inventions. They are continuations of an ancient defensive instinct, born when humans were not the hunters, but the hunted. The long, boring details of fire maintenance, thorn barriers, watch rotations, and whispered stories did more than keep our ancestors alive. They laid the quiet foundations of everything that followed.